Welcome to this week's Beyond Bitcoin Hangout. These hangouts are brought to you by the Beyond Bitcoin crew. We encourage everyone to freely share these recordings and to help spread the knowledge and benefits of our DPoS 2.0 blockchain technology that we all call BitShares. While listening to this recording, please feel free to visit our website, beyondbitcoin.org, and be sure to stay tuned in for some additional information at the end of the recording. As always, we would like to say thank you, and we appreciate your support. So please continue to vote for our delegate or worker contract so we may continue providing these valuable services to our community members. So once again, welcome, and please enjoy this week's Hangout.
Today is Friday, August 28th, 2015. This is another Beyond Bitcoin Hangout with yours truly, Fuzzy, and Bytemaster joining us again for his weekly update and community question and answer session. If you have a question, Bytemaster's here primarily to answer anything that you guys want to ask him. So feel free to chime in and make sure that if you feel like you don't want to speak out, make sure to keep a message down in the message channel, and I will try to ask the questions for you. With that said, Bytemaster, do you want to get started with any updates?
Sure. It's been another busy week of changes and fixes. We had our longest running test net from last Friday to the middle of this week. People were able to produce blocks and it kept going. We discovered a lot of interesting characteristics of the network code and the witnesses who are missing blocks when you're trying to operate at 1 second blocks. We also learned about some performance challenges with the structure of the blockchain and the validation logic. So we learned a lot from that test network. We are preparing for a new test network that incorporates a lot of fixes. So I'd like to take a moment to address some of the implications of what we learned this week, because it's going to have an impact on BitShares 2.0 release schedule and performance. So
I'm interested.
Yes. The numbers that we gave out on the performance of the blockchain were based on how fast we could do things on our local tests with local networks. What we discovered from the test network is nodes, when running at 1 second blocks, witnesses were missing their blocks a lot. There were lots of small forks that were going on. And this is primarily to do with the fact that the network code, as it existed a week ago, was unable to propagate blocks in less than a second. And so the delays associated with getting the blocks from one side of the network to the other was enough to cause witnesses to miss blocks when you only have 1 second to get it there. We looked into that, and there's actually some real mathematical reasons. Speed of light, based upon the protocol that we're using, which is the only part of the graphene that's the same as BitShares 1, was our network protocol. And our network protocol is based upon the same design pattern as Bitcoin, which is you advertise that you've got an item, and then if your peer doesn't have it, then they request it from you, and then you send it to them. If you take two peers on opposite sides of the globe and assume a latency of 250 milliseconds, then from the time you get a block, you advertise it to them, and they turn around and fetch it from you, and then send it back, you already have consumed half a second. And if you're more than one hop away from someone, you've got to repeat that process. And that's sort of best case latency. If there's any deviation at all, it's going to take more than 1 second to get a block to propagate between two nodes. And that's based upon the protocol that network code that we're using with BitShares. It's relatively proven code with BitShares network, and so we were hesitant to re-implement or change it. And there was another issue that came up with if a peer times out, the our timeout cycle for trying from a different peer was long enough that 1 second blocks, we surpassed our undo history, and then you get stuck. So we've made several changes to the network code as it exists to have faster retries, and that should solve a lot of the problems with nodes getting stuck. But we are still limited by the rate at which blocks can propagate through the network, which means that until we rewrite the network code, we will have to settle for probably 5 second or 3 second block times. This is not a limit of how fast we can process blocks or transactions. It's more of a limit on how fast we can propagate in a peer-to-peer network this data, given latency. That said, we have also come up with a new peer-to-peer protocol that it's spec'd out and roughly prototyped, where instead of advertising inventory items, we just immediately broadcast the transaction or the block to the other peer. We don't wait for them to turn around and fetch it from us, which has the effect of dramatically reducing the latency so that you can propagate 3 or 4 peers in a fraction of a second. And that should give us the ability to have, as long as you're within 2 or 3 hops of the witness, you'll be able to get your block in time. So witnesses need to be relatively well connected, and they should be, to make sure they can get and respond to blocks in time. So we did not want to delay the release of BitShares 2.0 based solely on the fact that we couldn't do 1 second blocks on the open internet with a loosely connected peer-to-peer network. So instead, we're going to start 5 second blocks, see how that goes with current code, and then it's just a network parameter change. It's not even a hard fork to lower it down to 1 second blocks once all the witnesses and major nodes have upgraded to the new P2P protocol that we've developed. So that's where we are there. We were a little disappointed by that finding, but it's certainly not killer, and it's just short term.
So is it safe to say you've been busy?
We've been busy. That's just one area where we've been. The other area the testnet revealed has to do with witness scheduling and random number generator, the blockchain. When people were re-indexing the blockchain after 3 or 4 days of operation with 1 second blocks, people were noticing that it was taking minutes to re-index. Back of the envelope calculation showing, hey, wait a second, this is going to take almost as long to re-index as BitShares, and there's no transactions, just blocks. And I was not happy with those numbers, so I did some investigation into why we could process 100,000 transactions per second and re-index them relatively quickly, but we couldn't re-index a year's worth of blocks, empty blocks, in less than an hour and a half. And we identified the primary culprit is the witness scheduler and the random numbers that we've been using. So we've put a lot of work into optimizing that and concluded, amazingly, that we can eliminate the need for witnesses to post commitments and reveal secrets while retaining all the benefits of witness shuffling. And that has the impact of saving the blockchain over a gigabyte of storage per year of just header randomness. So the implementation we used for the original scheduler had to enforce a lot of constraints. We wanted to make sure that no witness could go twice within half a round. So if you've got a witness at the end of one round and the beginning of another round, they should not go back to back. There should always be a minimal separation between when 2 witnesses could go. If you remember a while back, we created a bounty on the forum for the best implementation of that algorithm. And that's what we were using, was the algorithm that was produced by the community, and also seemed to be what Ben and I came up with ourselves initially. That particular algorithm was what was slowing us down, because we have to run that every single block. So we came up with a new algorithm. A new algorithm that is constant time and does not involve lots of allocation of temporary sets of things and comparison and cross-referencing things, and is more robust, and an algorithm that does not depend upon the witnesses producing randomness with their commit reveal scheme. But instead, we deterministically shuffle the witnesses based solely on the timestamp and the witness ID. So each time a witness produces a block, we check to see, we know which slot they produced the block in. And then each block, we go through all witnesses and we check to make sure that they haven't produced a block within the window. And then the witnesses that remain are selected based upon kind of like a proof of work scheme, only there's only one hash per witness. We hash them and take the one with the best hash of the ones that are available, which means we don't have to do any dynamic memory allocation or expensive computations. There are no cryptographic hash functions involved anymore. Instead, there's just a super fast a couple bit shifts and a multiplication. And the result is that the witnesses are still randomly shuffled, which is all we really need. Block headers are now 40 bytes smaller per block. So that's 40 bytes per second in savings. And the speed at which we can re-index the blockchain has gone up an order of magnitude. So those are the major improvements there.
It generally seems like every time you run into different issues, that it's almost like once you fix those issues, the entire ecosystem even gets that much better. So all these little things that you guys are finding now that the testnet is up and running, it's just finding now you're able to start drilling down into different areas and fixing them, as opposed to getting the entire foundation in place, right?
Right. So the reason we had to use dynamic memory allocation was only because of the algorithm that we and us originally came up with for tracking the set of eligible witnesses and the set of ones that have produced. So we had these sets around, and we probably could have reserved a static buffer for that, but that would have just been more work. So we didn't try to optimize on pre-allocating memory. Instead, we just tweaked the algorithm to make it not require any allocation of memory or reserving of memory. So by changing the algorithm, we improved performance. We removed a whole lot of dependencies, dramatically simplified the process of being a witness. If you remember, anytime you change the witness key or try to move nodes, you've got to migrate your secret from one node to the other so that you can reveal it and produce a block. That added a lot of complexity there. The other thing we noticed, you don't have to do that anymore.
How does it work now?
You just, when your time comes, you produce a block. You don't need to have any secret commit or reveal. So, so basically, we're going to be launching with 5-second blocks using the current P2P code. If that goes smoothly, then we can adjust the network parameters down to 1-second blocks and then 3-second blocks. And eventually, as we upgrade the network code, we'll go all the way down to 1-second blocks. It's 1-second blocks are beautiful from the user interface perspective, but 5 seconds is not bad.
Yeah.
So,
real quick, Arhag is following up on some of his earlier questions. He says, I'm pretty sure improving the algorithm to speed up reindexing is orthogonal to the choice of removing the provably fair RNG, right? I have no clue what he's asking there, but good job, Arhag.
All right, so the provably fair RNG is not completely provably fair. Every witness has a 1 bit of control over the entropy.
Random number generator.
Yes.
For those who are listening.
Right. So we could have left the random number generator in there, which is separate from the witness. And he's right. There are 2 separate issues. The only reason we needed a random number generator in the current consensus scheme is because of the witness shuffling. That's why we added it to begin with, way back in BitShares 1. The reason we removed it was for applications or smart contracts that need randomness. Getting it from the witnesses is not the best place to get it. From a gambling perspective, if we don't want to do that on the BitShares blockchain, the witnesses would still control 1 bit of entropy, which means that you can't do real-time gambling, and you'd have to wait a long period of time between the commitment and the reveal. And that's just not an application that BitShares is going to tackle because of regulatory reasons. So we don't have...
Lost you, Bytemaster.
Can you hear me?
I wasn't sure if I was the only one or not. I was getting ready to type it in.
So if you need provably fair random number generation schemes, there are better alternatives out there for it.
Okay, so data security is asking BitShares 2.0 question. We are working on Depot's Hub, and we are at a point where we need clarification about a 2.0 account. We would like to know if BitShares accounts in 2.0 will be registered as a delegate, witness, or worker simultaneously.
Yes.
Say that again.
They can be. Go ahead.
A particular account can be a delegate, a worker, and a witness. Those are just 3 independent properties. So a worker points to an account, a witness points to an account, and a delegate points to an account. So but you can only have 1 worker, 1 witness, and 1 delegate per account.
It sounds like, it would be the same type of functionality that you guys will be using to port the existing delegates over to that scheme, right?
It has nothing to do with porting it over, but yes.
Well, yeah, I'm using a terminology that in a way that you probably would not use it. I just mean like moving the account itself can remain intact as all 3. So it's very similar. There shouldn't be anything that would keep you from creating an account with all 3 on it as a new account like that.
Each account can only be one of those things, but it could be any of those things. But it's mutual. Each of those things are mutually exclusive, correct?
No, they are not.
No.
Oh,
you
wow.
can run all 3. Yeah, you can have work. Yeah, you can do all of those through the one account. It's basically like splitting up the roles of the delegate, and the community can decide if they're going to, if you're going to be all 3. But
gotcha. Very good.
DMO09. Do you think there is regulatory concern with allowing that?
I think the risk would fall on if all of the stakeholders ended up voting in the same people for all the roles, then those people would have a higher risk profile.
So we need to keep it as decentralized as possible.
It's in the interest of the parties to not seek out all 3 roles.
Yeah.
But the blockchain code does not preclude it. But yeah, it is interesting because the witnesses, we've decided that the witnesses should be as politically neutral as possible. So if you combine a witness with a delegate, that's kind of defeating the purpose of the design of the witness.
Correct. And that's also part of the reason why we removed random number generators from the witness, because that's no longer a politically neutral role.
Given that's the design criteria that you want to keep the witnesses neutral, why allow having it combined with something else. I mean, from one standpoint, it's freedom, so it's whatever the shareholders want to do. So I guess from that standpoint, it makes sense. But what's your thoughts on that, Bytemaster?
Good question.
Just because it'd be more work to have those constraint checks?
So it's something that the community can do currently, but it's not something that...
And there are many different blockchain signs out there where that might not be a concern. So I'm just keeping it flexible.
Sure.
I think it comes down to our general policies not to remove choices from stakeholders.
It's going to be very interesting because this is one of those things where everybody in the community, we need to be asking ourselves these questions. And I see a slew of various posts on the forums talking about the delegate system as it is. So I'm looking forward to hearing more people talking about it.
Right. So there's also the data security node. Ask the question, when proxy voters are enabled, do the original account holder lose their complete ability to cast votes? Or do they know when the proxy casts their votes? Well, everyone knows when anything happens because the blockchain is public. At any time, you can cast a vote to change your proxy. So you can remove your proxy and cast votes. You can change proxy. You can do that at any time. But once you set a proxy, if you're not paying attention, the proxy can change who they're voting for without requiring you to do anything. And that's a feature. That's the intent of the proxy accounts. So setting a proxy is not irrevocable. The other thing to keep in mind is that votes are only tallied once per day, which means if a proxy changes their vote and you don't like how they changed it, you can change your proxy by the end of the day to do that. So ideally, good proxiers, they would only change their vote at the beginning of the day to give everyone who's using them an opportunity to review their changes by the end of the day before it has any impact on the consensus. If you pick a proxy that changes their vote at the last second without an opportunity to review, they're probably a bad proxy for you to be using.
I can't wait for the first time when we end up having to deal with something like that for one day with just terrible votes. Because somebody finagles them, and these things are going to come. You know what I mean? It's not an if, it's a when.
It's happening right now, actually, on the 1.0 chain. It's happening, all this turmoil of votes and wild changes.
Yeah, but a lot of this to this point could be attributed to the GUI interface not being open. There's a
lot of reasons for it. Yeah, a lot of reasons it might be going on.
Yeah. So people tend to put down this process as though it's a failure at times. I've read things where they're like, delegated proof of stake doesn't work because of the voter apathy. But I don't know. We don't even know yet, I don't think, if voter apathy is as bad as a lot of people think it is. I'm sure it's there, but do we think it's as bad as it really is? You know what I mean?
I think a lot of people have expressed that they would prefer to set the vote one time to someone they trust and then let that person manage it. And it's more like an insurance policy. If it's not going in a direction you like, then you can pull it out and take action. Otherwise, you leave it set on default and let some core group of individuals steer the ship. That is centralizing in some respects, but it's not. It's controlled centralization in the sense that nothing can happen too quickly, and if you don't like which way it's going, then you still have the ability to switch courses. And I think that's going to be the most practical way for things to go, which probably means a lot of people will choose to set me as the proxy vote and set some of the other core developers as their proxy vote if they think I've got too much power, and then just leave it like that until they loss of confidence in the ability of the core developers to steer the ship, and in which case you come out and you vote directly. So there's some questions about proxy voting. Under BitShares 2, all balances are directly tied to your account unless you're using blinded balances. The blinded balances, you do not vote. So, because voting compromises privacy. So you can have your choice of either voting, being anonymous, and blinded. So when you vote, you specify literally the list of accounts, a slate that you will be voting for. And when you set someone else as a proxy, or saying, well, vote for me the same way that they're voting, means that you're going to use their list.
Yeah, and this is, you were responding to data security node, right?
Yes.
So
you don't get to pick whether or not you will be a proxy for someone else. You just get to pick who your proxy is going to be. Anyone can follow you.
So basically, if somebody's well trusted and knows a lot about BitShares, they could most likely be your proxy. What I think is cool about this is the type of democracy that you hear some of the people out there who are currently looking at our world and some of our problems that we're going through talking about. It's a more direct democracy. And we can, like you said, we can change our votes at any time. So it's really liquid democracy as well.
All right, so there's another factor here that I'm glad you brought up is we need the ability for votes to decay. If you have not updated your vote or reaffirmed your vote, then you're not continuing to assert your opinion, and you're kind of defaulting back to whatever the consensus is, whatever the active poll is. So if you want to have a say, you've got to be active. You can't be, I'm going to vote for someone and then disappear for a year, and then that person that you voted for does something terrible and you just don't change your vote. You don't review it. I look at it as kind of like you don't permanently cast a vote for the party you want. Each year you have to go out and recast your vote for governments. At companies, every time there's some that happens, you have to vote and cast a vote. So if you want to have a permanent vote that's set, nominate a proxy, and then that proxy will be responsible for staying active and voting on a regular basis. But if you think about it, a vote says at this point in time, these are good people. But as time progresses, that past vote of confidence does not carry the same meaning. You can't say this is a good set of people for all time. And so we need people to continually input into the system that this is currently someone who's good. And if they don't do that, then their votes either decay or no longer count at all. So there's another question that came up of if you set a proxy who in turn sets another proxy, you're not going to follow the proxy, the secondary proxy. So the reason why we don't allow you to do that is you could create cycles, have non-deterministic depth of the proxying of votes. So there is a limit on how indirect your voting can get.
Is the voting decay period going to be a variable or a parameter that can be changed dynamically by delegates?
Yes,
anything that can be parameterized will be parameterized.
Real quick, back to Arhag's question. How do you enforce against people doing that?
Doing what?
Basically setting a proxy account for another account.
If they do that, then the same as voting for no one. If you set a proxy who's proxy to someone else, then you're voting for no one.
Suddenly, then, somebody could change from not having a proxy to a proxy, which would nullify somebody else that was referring to them.
Correct. If you nominate someone that's a way, I guess, you can prevent someone nominating you as a proxy is to use a proxy yourself. So I think the idea is to have as few levels of indirection as possible. And I suppose that could be a parameter that we can set how far do you want to recurse? Because we only calculate votes on maintenance intervals, it just means that maintenance operations might take slightly longer if we allowed nested proxy. But we really want people to nominate someone who's active rather than to, I'm going to trust someone who's going to trust someone, because that's too far removed. I mean, ideally, everyone would actively contribute directly, but we see that too much to ask for that many people. There's cost associated with casting a vote and paying attention and following the politics, and most people do not have the ability to pay that cost, time and energy, to do the job responsibly. But anyone where they do have the time to pick someone who they trust to do it and do that job continually for them. You shouldn't pick someone who doesn't have the time to pick someone else. Just doesn't, kind of defeating the purpose.
It doesn't compute. You're right. Doesn't quite make sense. There's a little bit of a conversation here going on regarding Cora and atomic cross-chain coding. Is there anything in particular that you were wanting to bring up with Bytemaster regarding this?
I've said it.
Covered a lot of it.
Yeah, I've said it before. I don't think atomic cross-chain trading, I think it's a niche. It's something you do because you can, not because it makes any type of economic sense. The only time I can see atomic cross-chain trading going on is in a world where governments shut down all intermediaries, like exchanges or Shapeshift or those type of intermediaries. Those intermediaries are just so much more efficient than doing direct peer-to-peer trades between chains, that most users aren't going to go through the atomic cross-chain trading path. So I think it's an interesting concept, but it's doing something just because you can, not because. But there's another aspect to it. So IAM, which provides an alternative virtual machine to Ethereum, has offered to integrate his virtual machine with BitShares, and I'm very interested in such a concept. However, there are a lot of ideas out there about better approaches to blockchain-based arbitrary smart contracts than using a Turing machine.
Could you explain the concept of a virtual machine with the blockchain? I'm totally lost with that.
Sure. All a virtual machine is a set of instructions that are interpreted in a deterministic manner. So you publish on the blockchain the set of instructions you want it to execute, and when someone asks it to run, the blockchain and all the witnesses and all the nodes in the world evaluate those instructions with the same inputs and come to the same outputs, and it allows you to do arbitrary computation on a blockchain in reference blockchain state. So it's an interesting way of getting lots of smart contracts implemented without having to request the permission of the witnesses and the delegates and the community to add a new hard forking feature. So the only debate is, do you use a Turing machine, which in which case you have to be proactive in defending against infinite loops and expensive computations. So you have to meter every computation you do. You've got to meter your RAM usage and your storage usage. And so it's kind of like a pay-as-you-go virtual machine. And that metering is not free. It costs computational cycles. So there's if you have a virtual machine like the Java virtual machine, you can compile that, just-in-time compile, and get relatively decent performance. But as soon as you have to put metering instructions in there, it slows down performance by a factor of 10. And all of this stuff has to be done sequentially in a single thread, because it's unbounded problem of figuring out if two scripts are completely independent of each other. If we could figure that out, then parallel computation on CPUs would be much easier, but we know how difficult it is. to design for parallel computation. So we know that the bottleneck in blockchain is single-threaded throughput, and I think that putting a Turing machine scripting environment in the critical path has a lot of performance downsides, a lot of issues with it. That said, there's been 2 different white papers recently, or maybe it was one, and I'm just thinking of it differently, that talks about a different approach to defining smart contracts, a declarative approach, kind of like Prolog, where you state things that are true and you evaluate things that are implied based upon the things that are true. And that can have provable computation limits and provable characteristics. And I think that has a lot of potential, but it's also a lot more difficult, a lot more open-ended. So there's some work that needs to be done there to understand the best approach for doing smart contracts. And I don't think that jumping on board with the Turing complete scripting environment on a blockchain is the best approach. Right now, we basically require all scripts to be approved by the stakeholder and be compiled C++ code. That's a curated model versus a non-curated. And I think the curated model is probably going to give us the best performance and user experience to grow in a more controlled manner. Anything that's developed on an Ethereum or one of these other systems is going to have some performance challenges. I do like IAM's approach better than Ethereum's, but as far as adopting an entire scripting engine, yes, atomic cross-chain trading is like saying that we should adopt the Ethereum VM so we can do atomic trades with Ethereum. There are lots of things that we can do here, but we need to carefully consider it. I don't want to just jump on the bandwagon there.
Let's walk before we run.
Yeah.
Have you been talking to the development team working on SIAM?
I've talked to them a couple times, periodically every couple weeks. It's just, I'm trying to focus on BitShares too.
Sure. So anything that you guys might do in the future with them, if it is done, it'll be a pretty distant future.
I think if they want it done, they can create the patch for BitShares that allows them to integrate. And then we can review the patch, pros and cons, and then vote it in. It's just a matter of manpower. We don't have the manpower to do it for them.
Arhag's asking, couldn't putting arbitrary code, even if not Turing complete, elected by shareholders into that single thread critical path cause consensus issues like missing blocks? Seems like something we would want a higher barrier of entry for to make sure only well-tested code gets in.
Yes. Anything that is not deterministic in how it runs could cause consensus issues. That said,
makes sense.
Easy to make sure it's deterministic so long as you only reference blockchain state and you don't use floating point.
So something that's known.
Correct. You don't move, you don't incorporate data that's not available in the blockchain. So,
and that kind of brings me back to what you were talking about last week. And I just want to reiterate it because it's taken a week for it to soak in. But the blockchain and how it's going to be used in the future, especially for things like web apps.
That's still sinking in, isn't
it? You have, I don't know, I'm sure everybody has those moments where it's just like mind expanding. You're just like, my God, the implications are so huge. I can't even wrap my head around it, even if I try, But yeah, that's definitely been on my mind this week. Which is a good time to plug. We're going to have a little study group every week. So if anybody's interested in getting together with some community members who want to learn a little bit about coding and go at their own pace, feel free to look on the forums of the thread. But anyway, does anybody else have any questions before I get into a couple of the questions on the forums.
I guess I was surprised that nobody has brought up anything about the recent shifts, other than my mention of it earlier of the voting ranks of the delegates. But do you have any comments on that, Bytemaster?
Well, there's been a lot of marketing delegates and a lot of delegates that haven't been reporting regularly with updates. One of the things I noticed about this shift is that people that were not reporting suddenly say, "Hey, I just got voted out, guys. I'm still doing stuff." And so now we know who's actually still doing stuff. And we've got a lot of dilution adding to the sell pressure, if you will. So I think I'd be happy to see some of the 100% delegates voted out. There's a lot of people that have left the project entirely to go work at Google, for instance. And their funds need to be cut off. And so please, if you haven't voted recently, carefully review all the 100% delegates and make sure that they are still active and that there are still people you want involved in the project. Part of the problem we have is that 100% delegate doesn't pay for very much right now. So a lot of the people that are receiving pay, they work 1 day a month or maybe 2 days a month. That's not a lot to report, but they're still receiving 100% pay. And in aggregate, it's still a lot of money that the blockchain's paying out, which is not very productive use of the money. I used the analogy before that if you give 100 people $1,000 each, you're going to get less work done than giving one person $100,000 for a year. And that's the situation we're in right now. We've got 30 or 40 delegates receiving a couple $100s a month, when what we really need to do is concentrate all the funds to get one person receiving $100,000 a year.
I would like to add that with regard to delegate verbal tech, that one of the things that we're focused on is network infrastructure. And as we try to migrate down from 5 seconds to 1 second, that network infrastructure and reducing latency is a very important and critical factor to achieve that. So although I've been voted out, my partner has not been, but he's only getting a 30% cut. But we're going to have to expand our VPS nodes in order to achieve the distribution across the world that we need to. So I'm going to encourage people to reevaluate their votes with regard to verbal delegate and digitalia, the BTS tools, and vote accordingly.
Thanks for the update. Yeah, there are definitely a lot of different projects out there that I find myself going, my gosh, like mine BitShares has 1 delegate, and if some of these other delegates that have just been sitting there for years, almost anyway, it feels like it. They're sitting there, and what if we could redirect those funds to something that's productive, right? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the GUI interface, because I really think I think that we'll be pleasantly surprised. I think at least for a while, there are going to be a lot of people who have been waiting to be able to vote.
I would like to, if you're a 100% delegate, please post a link, publish the website information in your public data of your delegate position, because people might say, well, who is this delegate verbal tech? And if you try to Google it, it's not going to come up with anything. So you can easily lose track of who these people are and what they're doing. So if you don't have a website posted, even if it's just a GitHub link to README file that describes what you're doing, or maybe even a forum post that describes what this paid delegate is, then you're likely to lose votes, because people don't know, who is this person? And they'll remove votes they forget after they voted. So I would certainly, if there are anybody who got voted out in the past week that thinks they should be in there, you should show up in Mumble sessions. And so, is there anyone here who got voted out who would like to make a case for getting voted back in?
It's a very good question, a very good time to do it.
Oh, I just made mine, so I'll shut up now.
Which one? Can you state your delegates again?
Yeah, delegate.verbaltech. It's digitalia.bchestools, I believe. I'm not sure of my partner's exact explicit delegate name, but I think it's delegate.bchestools or something like. Digitalia is Digital Gaia. Digital Gaia is what his delegate name is. He's still voted in, though.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's somebody who has not been around for a little while. But we do dearly miss, of course. But
We have BitSpace. All right, what's BitSpace Lanes doing?
BitSpace Lanes, I'll tell you right now, I just saw the other day a 55-minute presentation on YouTube that he gave at, I think, a college somewhere on BitShares with his brother. So I don't know what else they're doing, but it was a pretty good little presentation from both of them. So I would actually urge everybody to go out and go on YouTube and type in BitShares and look up C-Lanes, Christian Lanes, BitShares Christian Lanes, and it'll pop up.
What about Ken Code? Is Ken Code one of the ones that got voted out recently, or is he still in?
Ken Code's a workhorse. That's one thing I know.
I know. So if he's not voted in now, then he needs to be. So he needs to be pitching himself right now. So,
hey Ken, are you there?
Yeah, I got the stuff in the chat window on the left.
If you would like to make any threats, right now would be the perfect time to do it.
And threats? That's not who we are, Fuzzy, man.
Okay, have you seen the proposal that Lucky Bit put up for Earn BitShares?
I have not seen it detailed. I did see something about Earn BitShares. Someone asking for the domain.
Oh, okay. Well, he was talking about bringing up a sister site to mine BitShares where there can be tasks that can be done to earn BitShares. And he was wanting to know if you've looked at the proposal, and if you did, what did you think? And you basically said you scanned over it. Have you thought about anything like that?
I saw the topic. I did not read the post. I think that having ways for people to earn BitShares is great. We need people that don't need tasking. So I don't have the bandwidth to task more people that are part-time or small-time jobs. The overhead associated with doing that is higher than the amount of work that they produce. So we need people that are self-motivated and make contributions. And you're really kind of at that point is like, hey, do something good for BitShares. Tell us what it is and get bonuses like brownie points. So if someone wants to figure out a way of distributing BitShares in addition to brownie points, I'd be all for it.
BitShares in addition to brownie points.
Well, anyone who earns BitShares also earn brownie points in my mind.
Oh, so they merge mine.
I figured that we're probably not going to be paying people full rates for the work they do if we're going to hire people to do odd jobs. And so anyone who's working below market rates should get some brownie points.
That's actually a really, I like that idea too. And I'll actually take it a step further. I don't know if you've considered this or thought about it, but in my mind has obviously just run wild on this idea of, what if all these different people who are doing different things in the ecosystem created their own tokens and exchange them freely among each other and have services like where you can actually donate and share drop a certain amount onto BitShares that it can distribute it, the tokens, kind of like brownie points are to you, of individuals within the ecosystem. So you might be able to merge mine 3 or 4 different things, or maybe bunker shares in addition to mine BitShares or something like that.
Well, I think having too many tokens to track fragments the markets, but I think there's lots of opportunities for a few concentrated tokens for large efforts. I'd like to address one last question before I get back in there, and that is the next testnet. We're planning on launching it as soon as we've got the GUI refactored. We've been refactoring the wallet interface. It's an unbelievable amount of complexity, and we're trying to mitigate it. So we've actually been pretty excited about our new architecture that we've put together for the wallet, because it can apply to more than just what we're doing today. But I want our wallet framework to actually evolve to be a general purpose framework for anyone who's trying to build web apps using the general principles behind Flux. So I'm using a lot of buzzwords here, but the general problem we have is you got the blockchain state, which is gigabytes and gigabytes of data, and you've got the user who you want to build a user interface as if it had direct access to all those gigabytes of data, but doesn't have direct access. It only needs to have like a subset of access, but it also needs to be notified of any time those things change. So we set up a new architecture that makes it very easy to build user interfaces that just get the data they need, and they can either get the data or they hold that, hey, it's currently undefined, but I'll let you know if it changes. And behind the scenes, it automatically queries the witness node for the data, automatically subscribes just to that subset. We just introduced a Bloom filter on the server side to make it easy to subscribe to tens of thousands of objects with a constant amount of server space RAM per connection. This is going to dramatically simplify the development of user interfaces to display the data, because it eliminates the need for the spaghetti code of make a request from the server and then do something else. So if you're a programmer, you probably understand what I'm talking about. If you're not a programmer, all you need to know is that we're taking some of the great strides in simplifying developing features, which at the end of the day means faster wallet development. And historically, wallet development has been our bottleneck, and getting that architecture right is the key to moving things forward at a high speed. So I've been actively working in the wallet now for about the past 3 weeks. And so this is all part of the process of getting that architecture to be as robust and elegant as the graphene framework on the back end.
Bytemaster, a quick question about the wallet interface and the back end. They're pretty much separate from one another. So when you make changes to the to witness nodes and in the infrastructure, the back end infrastructure, that doesn't affect the GUI wallet very much at all. Is that correct? Because the APIs are staying the same.
Generally speaking, that is the case. However, I added the Bloom filter and automatic subscription support to the back end to make the front end easier. Because what I'm finding is I try to build an API. Yes, here's an API. You can get all the data you need. And now that I'm on the other side of the fence trying to use the API we provided, the web developers, I realized that, yeah, no wonder it's taken them so long. We didn't give them a very good API.
It's good to have balance in your perspective.
So I wanted to make it really easy. The API had allowed them to subscribe to any object and get notified of changes. Subscribe to markets and get notified of anything that happened in that market, and subscribe to accounts to get notified of any objects that affect a particular account. But you had to manually subscribe and unsubscribe, and so we had all this traffic going on. As the user would navigate from page to page within the wallet, we needed to track subscriptions, which created a lot of complexity on the client side. And so now we have a very simplified assumption. You request the object once when you need it, and then you'll get notified anytime thereafter if it changes, which means that the wallet side on the your browser, it's just sitting there listening to a stream of update events coming in and then updating its interface as a result. It doesn't have to manage subscription requests and all that anymore. It just gets the data it needs and it gets updates. And then everything else is handled relatively transparently. So I'm going to be putting together some blog posts to describe the innovations that we've come up with on the web development side of things. So as far as timetables, I think we are still pushing very strongly to have this all out there by the end of October, upgraded to BitShares 2.0. So we're going to focus only on the features that are necessary to mimic BitShares 1.0 features plus the referral system. And then most of everything that we're doing is in the wallet. So we could launch today if we're okay pulling in Ethereum and saying, hey, blockchain's here, but sorry, no GUI. But that's where we are now. So we're holding off on the next testnet. I guess we could launch a new testnet while we work on the GUI if people want to just mess with it on a command line basis, which seems to be what people like. We're trying to avoid testing things that we know are going to change. So we don't want to test the GUI that we're in the middle of refactoring because that would be wasted effort.
Your last optimizations for the blockchain that were introduced late last week or over the weekend, I think, they broke the build. At least they broke the build from my standpoint and from Puppy's standpoint. And I don't know if those have been resolved yet. I haven't actually tried to build since then. So that's my only issue is I'd like to make sure that all is working well and we can build without any issues. And so I'd like to see a testnet for that reason alone.
Okay. Well, I'll try to get instructions for a testnet later today. Not going to promise that, but if at all possible, I'll try to get another one posted.
Thank you.
Well, I think this is a good time to cut it off. Thank you for everybody who showed up today. Thank you, as always, Bytemaster, for coming and joining us and answering all of our questions and giving us updates and being so transparent.
I'd like to thank whatever whales are in this discussion for being proactive in your voting, because apparently just the discussion here today has changed a lot of voting on the blockchain. So thank you for being active. And thank you also for everyone who showed up today and made a case for their delegate. I think in the future, if you're going to be 100% delegate and you're not actively working with the core dev team and checking into GitHub on a daily basis, you need to show up here and be prepared to answer for what you've done and answer these questions. So thanks again to the delegates who are here and contributing. And thank you also for the whales out there who are holding and voting.